Thank you guys so much for being here. DC is facing a number of issues when it comes to criminal justice reform, and those issues are oftentimes, compounded and exacerbated for women entering the system. We also know that victims of gender-based violence and the incarcerated are not mutually exclusive groups. Often they're one and the same. So I want to just kind of back all the way up and wonder if you guys can talk about some of the challenges that women who are incarcerated face.
So, yeah, I'm happy to start. Good afternoon, everyone. One of the biggest challenges, and I would say probably the primary challenge that we see, is this false dichotomy that we've created between victim and perpetrator. And that our criminal justice system is really predicated on the separation, and that those two entities or those two identities never overlap. And what we know when we look at women who are involved in our justice system, the overwhelming majority of them have victimization histories, and all of them have trauma histories. And if they didn't have a trauma history prior to incarceration, they absolutely have one post-incarceration. And our system is not really set up to address those victimization needs, those trauma needs. And we know that that's critical because hurt people. And if we don't transform our pain, we transmit our pain. And until we start addressing some of those underlying causes that sometimes lead someone on that pathway into the justice system, we'll continue to see that revolving door.
Sherri?
Okay, so what I would say is that being incarcerated as a woman, I was incarcerated and for about 22 months, and being incarcerated as a woman, I was not prepared to experience the experiences as a woman, like being incarcerated and being on your cycle and not having sanitary products provided for you. So you kind of stick together. The ladies in there will kind of help you out and give you stuff, but you're not even supposed to accept anything from anyone. So you're either going to be ashamed or embarrassed with how you're presenting, or you're going to be in violation of a policy. And which will in turn result in you possibly losing your good days. And anyone that's ever been incarcerated, they have one goal in mind that is always unequivocally the same, and that's to go home. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to risk anything that's going to jeopardize you getting home sooner rather than later. So you bear that shame, and that's just one thing I could tell you. There are hundreds of others types of violations and injustices and civil disrespect that you experience. You lose your civil rights. You're not supposed to, but you do. So that's one thing we need to be mindful of to any woman who's been incarcerated and you're dealing with her, because that, as she said, hurt people. So you are definitely hurt while you are incarcerated. Even if you wasn't hurt before, you have been hurt by being incarcerated. So now you're damaged when you come home.
Michelle, you work with the DC government. How are you thinking about both advocating for victims and thinking about compassionate reform, kind of taking in all of the trauma that they experience into account?
So the agency that I work for, the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, actually used to be two separate entities. It used to be the Office of Victim Services and the Justice Grants Administration. Office of Victim Services did very much what it sounded like, but our Justice Grants Administration really focused on the criminal justice efforts that we have around reform, around a fair administration of justice in the district, and those two agencies were brought together about 4 or 5 years ago. And it really presented an opportunity. There were some folks who I think were concerned about the merging of those entities. But when we look at the populations our agency touches, victims of crime, justice-involved individuals, so incarcerated and returning citizens, youth and adults, and youth who are at risk for truancy or juvenile delinquency, we recognized immediately those are not mutually exclusive populations. And the common thread across those populations is trauma. And so we've really focused our efforts on both meeting people where they're at in their lived experiences and prioritizing addressing trauma. So putting resources into both enabling our grantees. We fund about 110 different organizations in the district to enhance their ability to address the trauma needs of the people that they serve and to bring those services services to people in the communities where they're at. And we have really strong partnerships with some of our justice system partners who are doing amazing work. Our Department of Corrections is focusing on addressing trauma, and we are funding trauma-specific services within our corrections, which is unusual, I think, across the country. So we're really trying to address the needs of the people who are in our systems.
That brings up a really important point, I think, about mental health care as a vehicle to address trauma. Sherri, I want to ask you a little bit more about your experience being incarcerated in the District of Columbia and just what that was like. You mentioned access to women's products and sanitary pads, and that there are a range of ways that, you know, it's not necessarily set up to accommodate women for their needs, and I think mental health and, you know, other things are definitely a part of that.
Yes. So the majority of my time was spent at in a federal facility. Only about the last 30 days of my time was spent here in the city. But there's everything that you have to get through commissary. So if you want sanitary products, you have to buy them through commissary at like $5 or $10, depending. There's supposed to only be a 30% markup, but it's like hundreds of dollars. The markup is insane. So you really can't afford, if you want to eat other than what's in the dining hall, if you want to eat something else, then you can't afford to buy the sanitary products, or you can't afford to buy everything like you get a headache or you're sick and you don't go to sick call, or you have no money to go to sick call, and they tell you when you do go to sick call to go to commissary and buy aspirin or allergy meds. That doesn't work for anything if you're really sick. Mental health is non-existent, almost non-existent in facilities. They basically have what's called pill line. So if you, like, I was on anxiety meds. So when I first arrived, the first thing they did to me was make me take all these vaccinations. All of my vaccinations were up to date. So there's no way around it. So they gave me vaccinations, but apparently you're not supposed to get vaccinations in the same arm. So they gave me the vaccinations in the same arm, and my arm swelled up to 10 centimeters, and all they did, and I couldn't lift my arm, and I was literally dying. This is day 2. I was walking across the field trying to get to sick call, not knowing I was out of bounds and was about to get a shot, which is like a disciplinary action, but I couldn't move my arm, so I'm about to faint. Like, I was dying. And when I finally went in there and I took my shirt off, they was like, oh my goodness, all they did was draw on me a Sharpie pen to see how big it was, because I had swelling. For anybody in the medical field, I had edema in my arm and the swelling, and it was this big on top of my arm. They didn't give me anything, and I was at a work camp, so they made me go to work. And apparently, as they explained it to me, vaccines put a little bit of something in you to make your body develop antibodies to it. I had 2 different types of whatever in me fighting off within my body, which caused my body to react that way. Mm-hmm. So it turns out I had to rely on a stranger. One of the ladies who was there with me was a former nurse, and she gave me an old antacid, which used to be an early allergy pill, and that made the swelling go down, but the prison didn't do anything. I was literally dying, and they didn't do anything. And so I had to rely on a stranger to help me, which I shouldn't have took the what she gave me, but I had no choice. And I was taking a risk. We both were, because I could have gotten in trouble, she could have gotten in trouble, but it was like either I die behind the wall or I take what she's giving me. So I chose option B.
That's just one example, I think, of
just one.
That's one of what I imagine are many examples of kind of improper treatment in the system. Did you ever feel empowered to kind of raise the flag or, you know, file a complaint? Just talk to me about the experience of you and the women that you knew and coming to terms with having to report these kind of conditions.
I filed a lot of what they called administrative remedies. I filed a lot. Because I had never been in any trouble, so I was just a regular law-abiding citizen before my conviction, so I wasn't prepared for all of these injustices you face. Like, you have asthma and they don't want to give you your inhaler. They take all your inhalers. Or you have a deformity in your feet and they're making you wear combat boots and won't give you a soft shoe pads. That's something simple that's not costing them anything, but they won't do it. Or you need a van pass and you're not getting it. Or you need allergy medications. I have an EpiPen allergy to cats, dogs, grass, mosquitoes, you name it. And I went to a prison with a dog camp, and it's on a mountain with all grass, and they would not give me any allergy medications. They told me to buy the allergy pills from commissary, which I think 10 pills come in a bottle, so to get enough to last a 30-day supply, and the pills are like $9.80 or something like that. So to get a 30-day supply, I would need like $40 extra per month placed on my books, but every dollar that I received went against my FRP, which is if you have restitution, which I did. And it was insane amount of money that the more money you get in, the more your restitution payment goes. So there were women in there paying like $900 a month for restitution. Like, there were people in there paying, mine went up to $270, and I told that man, I said, listen, my anxiety is up. I don't care what you do. I'll sleep on the bus stop. I'll do whatever. And the bus stop is like, see how we're in this room with these bright lights? That's the bus stop. You out in the open with bright lights on you where you sleeping, and there's no privacy or anything. So I was like, I'm not paying that money. It's no way I can afford that, and I only make $5 a month on my job in prison. It's like, and if you refuse, that it's very traumatic, and you have no medications for anxiety or any mental health issues at all.
I'm so glad that you talked about kind of your willingness to go forward and make those complaints. Paula, I want to bring you in because you work a lot with the immigrant community here in DC, who, for a variety of reasons, we're talking about it backstage, are feel less empowered about coming forward. And I wonder if you could just talk about what are you hearing from those women when you're speaking with them?
Yes. So, as you all know, there's an increase in detention for immigrant families who are crossing the border and immigrants who are here without documentation, both women, men, and children. That's a great problem that we see from our client community. And then another issue, Ayuda represents a lot of domestic violence survivors and survivors of other gender-based violence like human trafficking and sexual assault. And we're seeing that people are much more fearful of reporting because they would be reporting to a government actor who they are also scared of because of the of ICE, of the threats of the administration. And so, it's an interesting situation that's causing a lot more victimization, and also I think making us all less safe because immigrants are, the climate at the moment makes people fearful of reporting the crimes for which they are victims, and so perpetrators can just continue to perpetrate whatever crime it is.
Paula and Michelle, I kind of wanted your thoughts around what does work when a victim wants to come forward and they do want to report kind of within the boundaries of the system that exists, kind of what is working and what isn't.
Yeah. So we do have a number of people who come to us who have not reported their victimization. We have holistic legal services and social services. That works. So our attorneys will do a consultation with the client, will explain the legal form of relief. The client might not be ready to report yet, or they might still be in danger. And so the first thing to do is safety planning. The case manager or social services staff will work with them on that. But the fact that they have an attorney at the same time allows us to do it in a manner that sets them up for success. For example, our clients require certain documentation in order to make their case to immigration. So we make sure that the case manager is aware of if they're in the process of leaving a dangerous situation, that they're able to take the documentation with them, that they know what they need to take. Our case managers will go with them often to make the report. having kind of someone there supporting them along the way, having an attorney they feel protected, that their rights will be protected as they go through this process and they feel less vulnerable. So I think the holistic services is a very important component.
And I would agree with Paula in that Ayuda is one of the many organizations that we fund in the district to provide those support and advocacy services, and that we know from the research that individuals who have those advocates are more likely to engage with the criminal justice system and stay engaged with the criminal justice system because they have that support, but that they're making that informed decision for themselves about what is that right pathway. And so one of the things that we did in 2016 was to launch a citywide victim hotline that is the single point of entry for all victim services in the district, for anyone to access the very types of services that Paula was talking about.
And when you're hearing from these women who sometimes might not have these advocates, we've already talked about how that is, a really great and supportive experience. What are you hearing from them? Do they feel like their lawyers, judges, the people that are kind of dealing with their case, are they listening in most occasions?
There is a great deal of fear to step foot in a courthouse or a police station. So I think a lot of the people we're speaking to just it would not occur to them to go to a police station, to reach out to the police with the idea that they will be helped. So, unfortunately, that's the situation. And then us as attorneys, talk through the situation and can help them when they do feel ready to report the victimization.
Sherri and Michelle, I wonder if you've heard or experienced similar levels of kind of distrust that folks don't connect with the assumption that they will be helped.
We definitely have, and I think part of it, again, is when we look at how our justice system is set up, the victim is ancillary to that system often, that it is the state versus the accused or the perpetrator, and the victim may be a witness in that case. And what we've seen a shift over the past couple decades is really this movement to codify victims' rights within our system so that they have a voice in that process, and that when they're supported by advocates, they can actually feel empowered through that. We know from talking with victims that those who have the opportunity to participate, to confer with prosecution, to say what they want, even if they don't get the outcome they were hoping for, the fact that they were included in that discussion and process leaves them with higher levels of satisfaction about the outcomes than when they're just completely ignored throughout the process. Mm-hmm. But we know it's also critical to get people connected with those services, and in many cases, there's a lack of awareness that those services are available.
I think when you are incarcerated and you are a victim, and you want to complain, you become a target of retaliation. So like me, I didn't know any better, so I was complaining about everything and writing up every violation. I had like 100 administrative remedies, but the main one was, as an inmate, there are two things that I didn't know. Inmates don't have the right to consent to sex. So even if they're engaging in a relationship with an officer or anybody in the facility, even if it's consensual on the inmate's part, they don't have the right to consent, because you are basically in the custody of the government or the state. And the fact that if you do have a PREA, which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act complaint, like a male officer should never do a pet down search of a woman in a facility. I have a PREA complaint. I haven't filed it because the one complaint I had, when I did try to file it, they basically swept it under the rug, and I had to get the national PREA office to even make them file a complaint. But I was the victim of a pat down search of a man, and he started at my hips and then went between my legs all the way down. Now ask me what he was looking for. Food. Food is contraband in prison. Like, if you're hungry, you can't take the food out of the dining area, and they deem it as contraband, which is not even the correct definition of contraband. And he did all of this on a complaint because I filed a complaint because they did not honor my diabetic meal plan in prison. So the meal plan was not diabetic friendly. So my blood sugar was just off. I couldn't even get the right meal plan. And when I filed that administrative remedy, one of the other officers called in that I had stolen a soda from CDR, and I was the victim of a pat-down search. So now I'm always leery of men that come up behind me or walk close to me or anything, because you cannot be more violated than having a man like start in your crotch and go down your legs, and you're basically helpless to do anything. And when you report it, you're reporting it to someone who works with John, who is the best guy. And though John didn't touch you, because everybody knows he wouldn't. And I said, well, everybody don't know because he did. You know, like it just takes you through so much. And when you do have those complaints, the process right now in the Bureau of Prisons is to separate you, segregate you. So they take you from the compound, almost like in the middle of the night, they almost like they're kidnapping you and take you somewhere that is terrible, like to a county facility while they fake investigate. And the conditions are so deplorable that nobody wants to make it known or file a report. They just deal with being victimized like that. And then even having like when my family came to visit me, every time they came to visit me, I had to have a full strip search of all my cavities for a 90-minute visit. So you have all your clothes are off and they're looking like, and it's very humiliating. You have to spread your cheeks, spread your genital area, open your mouth, shake out your hair. It's very demeaning just to be connected to your loved ones for 90 minutes. So this is what women go through in prison.
We're going to take audience questions in just a second, but I have one final question for you all. There is a lot wrong with the system. As far as kind of immediate priorities, what are the changes that you want to see to shift the system toward being more helpful to women?
I would say a decreased use of detention.
I would say having an advocate at the prison to ensure that these things that are not occurring.
And ditto. And that reentry truly starts on day one, so that when we do have people in our systems, that we are providing every resource, tool, and support to make sure they're successful once they leave.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions in the audience? One right here.
1 second.
Oh.
I just have a question. Is it Adrienne? Yes.
Sherri.
Oh, sorry, Sharon. So what happens when people or organizations make attempts to donate feminine products to the prisons?
A lot of times they will say that they cannot receive donations from outside sources. I know where I was at Alderson, Martha Stewart spent time there, and she got the cottages closed down because it was asbestos. And she offered, I'm told, to help incur the cost of renovating or doing whatever they needed to do, and they turned her down flat and said it wasn't authorized. It's very hard to navigate within the Bureau of Prisons to do things like that.
So is there, but by chance, do you know since this seems like a great platform for that, there's been like a lot of different speakers, people that deal with policies. So I think we even had someone like Kimberly Fox. Is anyone here that would possibly be able to help change that?
Well, they have passed laws that they're supposed to provide sanitary napkins. While I was in, they were supposed to provide the sanitary products, but while I was there, the warden had what I call housed everything in storage and was not passing them out. So he had cases and cases and boxes, but wasn't giving them to the ladies. So you just had them on the prison compound and you're not passing them out. He said officially he was trying to figure out the best way to do it, but I might add that the whole lot of them were carted off and the captain convicted of raping inmates. So they were carted off by the National Guard, but I bet you all didn't hear about it. You know, it was kind of swept under the rug. So the warden was doing other things than trying to figure out how to dispense sanitary products.
We have one more question.
Hi, thank you. My name is Melanie. I'm just interested. This is mostly about funding. Is there anything that you guys are, the statistics that you're given and the statistics that led up to passing the PREA have indicated that the most raped demographic in the United States of America is African American men. So everything you're saying about how victims and victims of childhood violence become perpetrators, I think pertains equally to men and to women. Are you able to allocate funds to help raped men? And do you? And then also, are you seeing specific issues that only pertain to women?
So from a funder's perspective, absolutely. So our focus was on women in the justice system because one of the things we recognize is that many of the responses in our system are designed for the per capita majority of folks who are in that system, which we know are men, and are, in our country at least, largely black and brown men. And because of that, in many cases, the programs that are in place do not address the specific barriers of women in those systems, which is why we were focusing on those issues. But absolutely, the resources that are available for women who experience sexual violence, whether it's while they're incarcerated or before their incarceration, we fund those services as well. The federal funding that's available around sexual assault does not have a limitation on gender. The statute is very clear that they can be used for serving male, female, non-binary victims as well.
Sherri, Michelle, Paula, thank you so much for joining us.